In this video, we are going to break down scope in Python, what it means, why it matters, and how it can affect your variables inside functions and outside. If you have ever seen an error saying a variable is not defined, it might be because of scope. Let's fix that today. So the first question is, what is scope in Python? Scope defines the area where a variable is recognized or accessible. In Python, there are 4 types of scope. So 4 types scope. First we have local, then enclosing, then we have global, and then built-in. So local means inside a function, a scope. Enclosing means in outer functions and nested functions. Enclosing means in outer functions as well as nested functions. Global means at the top level of a script or module, and built-in means automatically available, like the print statement. Python follows LEGB rule for scoping. So first it gives priority to local scope, then enclosing scope, and global scope, and then the built-in scope. So let's break it down with example. Let's say we have a function called greet, and there we have a variable called message with the value hello, and we are calling to print the message. Now if we call the greet function and run the code, you'll see it prints hello. We have this message variable. We can print that inside the function, means the function block, because both are local inside this function block. But if we don't call this function and run the code, it does not print, but the message variable is there in the code but inside the function block. But if I try to print that message variable outside the function, and if I try to run the code, you will see name error, name message is not defined. So here message is defined inside the function greet. It exists only while the function runs. Outside this function, this variable is not available or visible. Okay, let me comment this example. So it was an example of local scope. Okay, now let's take an example of global scope. So global scope. Let me run the code. You can see the output is empty. Now if I write a variable called a name equal Alice, and if I create a function called say hello and write the print statement and say hello then name, as it is outside the function and in the top level of the program, so it is a global variable and we can access that variable inside functions as well. So now if I call the function say hello and run the code, you'll see it can access Alice, and so it prints hello Alice. So name is defined outside of the function. Inside the function, Python can read global variables. But there is some gotcha here. So let's take another example. Let's have a top level variable or a global variable. For example, count equal 10, and let's create a function called update count. In the function body, I'll do count equal count plus 1. Then I'll print count. So if I try to do that, it will not allow me. It will throw error because count is a global variable and we are trying to modify that inside a local block inside a function. So if I call the function update count, it will just throw an error saying unbound local error, cannot access local variable count where it is not assigned with a value. So why is this error? Python sees count equal count plus 1, so Python assumes that we are trying to create a local variable inside this function, but you are using it before assigning a value inside the function. So we are using this count variable in the same line. So we are trying to use it before assigning a value inside the function. To fix it, you need to tell Python that you are using the global count. So for that, before this operation, you just have to write the global keyword and just write the count variable name. Now this will fix the error. Now if I run the code, you'll see everything works fine. So the count was 10. Now it became 11 in this line and we are printing 11. So global count tells Python that we are referring to the global variable, not a local one. Let me comment these functions, this as well. If I run the code, okay, the terminal is now clean. Now let's see example about enclosing scope. In other terms, non-local scope. So if I create a function called outer, which has a variable called x and that holds a string called outer, let me make the O capital, and inside that function let's have another function called inner, and there let's try to print x so it looks in enclosing function. So now in the outer function, if I call the inner function, and outside the outer function, if I means in the main level, if I call the outer function and run the code, you'll see it prints outer. Here x is not inside inner, but Python checks the enclosing function outer and finds it. So for the inner function, the outer function is the enclosing function. Now let me comment this example as well, and let's see the use case of non-local keyword. Let's say we have a function called outer. There we have a variable called count which holds the value 0, and inside that outer function, let's say we have an inner function. Now we can have a non-local variable, so we can tell that we want to use that variable and that is non-local in this scope. So count, and we want to do count plus equal 1, and then I can write the print statement and just pass count. After that, inside the outer function, I can call the inner function twice, and in the top level I can call the outer function. Okay, now if I run the code, you'll see it prints 1 then 2. So non-local tells Python use the variable from the nearest enclosing scope, not global and not local. So it tells Python that do not create a local variable called count and do not use global variable as well. So if you have a global variable, non-local tells to not use that as well, but just to use the nearest enclosing scope. Means it is the function scope, so its nearest enclosing scope is this outer function scope, means the immediate parent function, you can say. So the summary here is Python checks variable in this order, which is LEGB: local, enclosing, global, and built-in. Use global keyword to modify global variable inside a function, and use non-local keyword to modify a variable in an outer but not global function. Scope might sound scary at first, but once you understand LEGB and how Python looks for variables, you will write cleaner and safer code. So that's all for now. See you in the next one.